I feel like we don't have to name this right now. We'll just make a few episodes, see how we feel.
Sure. Yeah.
And we can name the baby later on.
Name
Very Chinese style.
I'm not ready to call it a baby yet. It's like a
It's the
or
fetus.
it's in the fetus state. I can ask you, Payson, why are we sitting down and doing this?
Because this past weekend we had a really nice girls' trip to Banff. And we realized that the entire weekend we talked business and we talked work and industry trends and macro trends. And we just thought, is this a
Making
really
us sound
interesting
boring.
space? We promise we're also fun. We also talked about boys and food and travel. But we realized that both of us listen to a lot of podcasts and we love, people like Prof G and the All In Pod, and we learn from them. But we're also a lot younger and we have, in some cases, different perspectives. So we wanted to get together and just take our conversation and put it on the internet and see if other people find it interesting too. Yeah. What's your perspective, Viv?
Yeah, definitely. And I think we talked quite a bit about this, but I have a similar perspective. I think it's always a journey. We're always learning, and we figured that there might be some folks that want to come on the journey with us. As you said, we're two kind of young mid-professional women. We have enough career experience, have enough experience to have some perspectives on things, but we're also still trying to figure it out. So I think this is, this podcast will hopefully be a reflection of that.
I am Pei, or call me Pimo. I work in product at a gaming company called that you may or may not have heard of, but right now, this year, we launched what is the biggest, I think, mobile game potentially ever, depending on how you look at the numbers, called. And I work specifically with innovative new tech. My background, I've dabbled in Web3 and crypto. I also worked in consulting, but Viv and I met at business school and have been friends for many years now. And you?
Yeah, so I come from a very different background. I think most of the main aspect we have in common is that we went to business school together. But since other than that,
we have more things in common than that. We're both Asian females.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. We have more in common than that. But professionally, my experience is primarily in the financial industry. I work at which is an asset manager. And specifically, I work in an area called international fixed income, which, before it puts everyone to sleep, is I invest in other countries. So have I think compared to Payson, more of a, macro or kind of international perspective on some of these questions. But, looking forward to hearing what you bring from tech and that side of the world.
Yeah, really, you're the smart one. I'm just here for entertaining commentary. So
that's not true, but I think having a fun personality helps with these things.
Yeah. This is, I guess, also where we should say that everything we share on this podcast is completely our own opinions in our spare time with nothing to do with our employers.
Yes, exactly. That's very important to emphasize.
So today's topic, everyone from every college student right now in America to all CEOs of major companies are either using or talking about using AI. So maybe just keeping it broad first, how have you seen AI impact your world in finance and investing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think everyone is either using AI or desperately trying to figure out how to use AI. So I think, we are no exception to that. I think my perspective, I might be a little bit more optimistic than some folks. Well, maybe let me put it this way. I think there are upsides and downsides. I think my perspective is that AI is a tool that can enhance efficiency and make you faster and better at what you do. So I think for folks that can leverage this tool effectively, it makes them better at their jobs. And, that will, entail career growth, compensation, all of these things. And for folks that, aren't going to be as quick to adopt, I think it's going to be a challenge then to figure out how to keep up. So for me, at least at this point, it's a differentiator. It's another point of differentiation between folks who are good and going to get better at what they do versus folks that
Mhm.
may struggle a little bit.
What's your
Yeah.
take on what that means for society? And I feel like I've heard different maybe perspectives. Some people talk about bank tellers back in the when did ATMs come out? I don't know, 80s, 70s? I have no idea.
Yeah, it's testing my knowledge.
Something
I
like
don't know.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some people talk about how, we were all concerned there were not going to be enough jobs, but actually that just enabled people to move up the value chain.
Hmm.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very serious question, and I think it's going to be very impactful for everyone in all of society. I mean, I think up until now we figured it out, right? Where this creative destruction, where some jobs become obsolete, but then it creates new jobs, new industries. Who thought that we would have hundreds of thousands of influencers, right? That's
Yeah.
something that was
Us
unimaginable.
included.
Yeah. Burgeoning, wannabe
Burgeoning.
influencers. Um, so who would thought that that would be possible? And I think that's the case for a lot of different jobs. But the question is always, is this time different, right? Is the destruction going to be so fast and so large in scope that people aren't able, not enough jobs are created, or people don't have enough time to adjust, right? I think we've seen as well is that the jobs that are destroyed, it impacts people, but it's not those same people that can always find the new job or have the right skill for the new jobs that are created, right? So the other side is that even if net you create as many jobs as you potentially destroy, the issue is that it might be for different people in different places, and so there's still going to be folks that are probably going to be disadvantaged by this. And we've seen this with a lot of the discussion of like the hollowing out of energy and manufacturing and all of that, and a lot of the political challenges that we deal with today stem from these issues. So yeah, so I think no one has a crystal ball. It's hard to tell, but I think there could be some big changes happening. What about you? What do you think?
I mean, I agree with a lot of what you said. I use AI, I should say generative AI, because AI has been around for a while, but generative AI specifically, I use it day to day in my work with product, like writing specs or whatever. I now start with AI as a base. And I think that I'll talk about this from a few different perspectives. First is like the employee perspective. I think at this point, I have an expectation of my teams to use AI to be more productive, faster, efficient, all of that. And I would also not join a company anymore that doesn't advocate for AI. Because I think
Mhm.
if you're not offering that to employees, that just says something about how innovative or how kind of competitive you are. So that's
Yeah.
the kind of current angle. But you talked about like what does this mean, all those scenarios of okay, who's going to lose a job, who's going to maybe gain a new job in a different work, a different industry or sector. I feel like AI is a bit different from previous technological innovations, and I think I want to say it's like Mark Andreessen who also says this too, but AI is a disruptive kind of technology that really moves up the value chain in a
Mm.
way that, and the marginal difference between a teller and an ATM versus the ATM being that new disruptive technology versus like a software engineer and like a generative AI writing code. I think that gap is much, much bigger in terms of skill. So
Mm.
I am not so confident that there will be a net kind of equilibrium, even in quantity of jobs, let alone like who those people are. But one potential area where I feel like this does maybe right the kind of uh, what is one of these things called pendulum.
Pendulum.
Yeah, what does right the pendulum a little bit is that it's jobs like ours in these like white collar kind of computer based jobs that are now suddenly at risk of disruption
Mm.
versus maybe like a chef or a driver. Well, actually, no, drivers with the autonomous vehicles,
Yeah,
maybe not.
yeah, it's a tough
But
one.
but there are, I think, much more maybe hands-on jobs, a plumber that
Mhm.
are not going to be disrupted, and that's great because those sectors have been left behind in some cases as our worlds have taken off.
Yeah, to some extent, it's a way to equalize, or it's an equalizer for white collar versus blue collar, right? Is to some
Right.
extent you're seeing, even the last few years, I think you've seen this where white collar has been disadvantaged for a little bit, even though historically that's not been the case
Yeah.
typically.
But what do you think? I'm curious about what you think from a macro level, whether it's like, let's say, the US versus other countries, or, I mean, also interesting is like concepts of universal basic income. But what do countries need to think about?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a huge issue for if your predictions are right, are correct, and this is really such a disruptive technology that's really going to impact the way that we see work, or the way that people work, as a concept, of who should work, who needs to work, do we still need to work? All of these questions I think are going to come to the forefront. And I think this is something that government really does need to think about. And I don't, I think there are questions about whether folks in office today are in a position, or have the experience to contemplate these such radical changes. But that is
Yeah.
something that government and policymakers will have to think about, is how to address the societal impacts of this disruption. I think one of the challenges that we're already facing is growing inequality, and I think this is another factor that could potentially drive that. Right, the people who have skills versus the people who don't have skills,
Mhm.
people who can learn those skills and the people who can't, and then as well as the tensions between labor and capital. Right, is a big issue. This is definitely pro capital, and against
Can you
labor.
talk about that a little bit more? Labor, capital, just explaining that concept a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I think labor is fairly straightforward. It's people working, it's elbow grease, it's going to your job and doing what you're supposed to do,
Yep.
and getting a paycheck. And that's a wage, that's income. That's how typically, historically, people have thought of making a living, as you go to work and you make money, and that income supports your life. Capital is really return on investment. So that's more of an idea of your investments, your stocks, your other types of investments making money for you kind of passively, and who owns the returns on that investment. And so this is typically businesses and the people who are behind those businesses. And so typically there is a tension between labor and capital, because theoretically the more you pay your workers, the less shareholder value you can deliver to your shareholders. But on the other hand, right, the issue is that companies also depend on consumption. They depend on people's abilities to consume, and also society depends on people being content with the society that they live in, and
Yeah.
and the social contract that's been established. And so to some extent, right, labor can only, and the people can only be pushed so far. And so in some ways, I'm concerned that if it does go that way, and capital is really kind of banging it out against labor, that you're really kind of sowing the seeds for
Yeah.
discontent in your future problems. So
I think if you look at recent events like the United Healthcare CEO shooting, the kind of internet sensation that M. Luigi M has
Mangione,
created.
Mangione,
Mangione,
however.
thank you, thank you. It's pretty apparent, I think that, and if you look at metrics of inequality, like the Gini coefficient over time, at least here in the US, inequality has been rising. Do you think AI contributes towards increasing inequality then in that sense?
If it plays out to kind of what you were talking about, and people are going to lose, potentially be out of employment, and not be able to then transition into new employment,
Yeah.
or even to some extent what I'm speaking about, in the sense that the people who can become faster and more efficient get paid more, but then the other folks maybe get paid less, or companies feel as if they can hire fewer people to do the same amount of things. then yeah, then you could see, I think, growing inequality for sure. And it's some ways in a trend that we've seen. It's not a new trend, right? As I'm trying to
Yeah.
say is that this is a trend that we've seen for decades now, and AI potentially has the ability to accelerate that even
Yeah.
faster.
So I
Yeah.
did a fun little exercise over this week. I thought about what are the jobs that I think would get disrupted by
Mm.
AI,
What
and
is you?
jobs where like, well, so I thought first one, therapists.
Oh, interesting.
About 2 or 3 years ago, before this generative AI boom, I made the prediction that therapists was going to be a very high in demand job as a country, at least in the Western world, the developed world, we increasingly focus on mental health and all of these things, and that becomes less stigmatized. That therapist was going to be a rising demand, which I think was true. But after
Yeah, it's
Gen
definitely
AI,
true.
and given how hard it's been to find a therapist in my experience in the past, yes, it's been true. But right now with Gen AI, what I realize is I've gone to ChatGPT for like pseudo therapy. And with the memory function of
Mm.
ChatGPT, for example, it knows me, it learns me, it remembers things about my past. And fun fact, if you didn't know this, you can turn this on or off in your ChatGPT for those who are worried. But for sure, like you're on demand 24/7, and slap a voice on that, which ChatGPT has already. That's therapy aid at scale. So that's one.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that that AI can be taught to have the level of human emotion and care that goes into connecting with a human therapist? That's one question. And then my other question is, do you think, you know, is there liability in providing bad advice, right? Because there's always the risk of that too, right? AI not flagging something or saying something or recommending something that it shouldn't, and there could be consequences, physical consequences to that. So I'm wondering what
Yes.
you think about those two things.
Yes. Okay. The second one, definitely yes. And I think with ChatGPT, anything, they try to provide that disclaimer. In the future, maybe there are companies, actually, therapy focused companies like Oliva or some of these BetterHelp or whatever, that are providing AI services. And they probably still have some level of disclaimer, but just think about the price relative to the risk. And in this case, I mean, normal therapists could provide bad advice too, right? Any human could be having a bad day and providing bad advice. So I think in terms of the risk reward ratio, I think it still leans in the favor of therapy at scale through AI. And the first question, can AI replace a human for care? So I think that AI can provide the sense of care and compassion that a human could over text or even over spoken if you were to put a voice against it, because you can tell ChatGPT right in the tone of blah 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 and it will do that. So 100% I think it can. It's not creating care or compassion, but I think
Mhm.
it can convey that. But where the one area where I don't think AI has succeeded thus far and maybe would never succeed is true creativity, not derived creativity from, like, if you tell AI, hey, paint me a picture of like Mormons, and you can say, make it more Mormon, make it more Mormon, and it can throw all these like more and more Mormon things into it. But like true original creativity, I think is still protected.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think in my opinion, I think, a very overly simplified, very generic and overly simplified kind of hurdle to cross for whether a job is going to be disrupted by AI or not. I actually think is like, is there is there scope for excellence, right? Is there a ceiling on how good you can do your job? If it's really only, hey, can you provide this answer, or can you do this thing that's very set and stable, then I think it could eventually be automated and AI'd away. So I think art and writing and creativity is a fantastic example of that. Is you'll never be able to take away true creativity, because there's no it can always be different and better and great in different ways. But I think the counterexample to that is like driving, right? There's
Mhm.
only, and I'm talking about racing. I'm talking about like day to day, 9 to 5, get you to your job driving. There's only a limit on how good of a driver you can be. You can be a terrible driver, but if you're
Yeah.
just driving and you're doing your job, you're following all the rules,
Yeah.
then there's only a limit to how great you can be at that. And so I think that's easier to have a machine do.
Well, then that kind of begs the question, which is, what about our jobs? Your job, my job. Are they AI awayable?
Yeah, maybe we'll start using that as a word. I was AI'd away. Uh, well, I'd be curious to hear the other two jobs that or the other, industries that you thought of. I mean, I think there are definitely elements of finance that will go away. I think no doubt. I think there are compliance functions. I mean, finance is a highly regulated space, right? As it should be. It's highly regulated, which means there are many layers of checks in place around a large variety of things, especially in the space that I operate in. And I think the accuracy is still a bit of an issue, right? We need the accuracy to be there, but I think there are definitely ways to simplify, or kind of use technology to manage those compliance processes and reduce the amount of humans that interface with that. So I think that's an example. In terms of my specific role, I mean, it very much could. I think, AI could become good enough at analyzing market dynamics to make predictions about investments. I think quant investing is obviously a huge, a huge and growing part of the investing of the investment profession. So there is definitely a possibility that it goes away. The part that gives me some comfort is I tend to, I operate in a world where of what we call emerging markets or other countries, and sometimes the data is not there. Sometimes they struggle to have electricity. So sometimes, in certain ways, I think that is a bit more protected for now. But what about you? What do you think about your role?
It's easy to think no, that, oh, my job is protected because I make executive level decisions, or I, you know, handle complicated whatever teams. I think that maybe the difference of my job, what I tend to think is, the more I think AI pushes people. Well, actually, I'd be curious. I'll give you my take. Okay. Does AI and the emergence of this tech mean that we should be specialists now, and you are only valuable if you are like truly the expert on certain things? Or are you valuable because you are a generalist, you can lead teams, you can motivate people to get things done? And that's kind of the path that I've taken in my career, is very much kind of like, I'm not an industry, well, gaming, I guess, industry expert, but not a deep, like niche expert, more so just a good, I guess, mini leader of people. So that, how do you replace that with AI? I'm not sure.
For me, I think the truly human elements are also more difficult to replace in my mind, right? How do you motivate people? How do you get them to perform to the best of their ability? How do you set direction? How do you strategize? In the bigger picture sense of strategy.
Yeah.
I think these are, again, in my opinion, still a bit difficult for AI to take
Yeah, no
over.
one no one wants to report to an AI boss, is what you're saying.
I don't know. Who knows? Maybe I feel like I'm, where we are, I think, baby millennials, which means, I think we're still like, we grew up still like speaking to people over the phone. Like, I still call customer service agents sometimes instead of like using the chat. But there's an argument to be made that the younger folks would be happy to never talk to another human again in some
True.
capacity. So who knows?
Possible.
Maybe there will be AI bosses.
Yeah. Well, just quickly, the two other jobs that
Mm.
I kind of off the top of my head immediately thought of was, another one is tutors. I think AI can teach much better than a human, because say you ask me a tough question, I don't know the answer. well, I can't learn on the spot, right? But an AI, you always have that kind of knowledge database, and you can understand and decipher things, maybe even explain things better. That's one. And then the other I thought of, unfortunately, living in LA, is a lot of like background actors and all of these, which there were strikes
Yeah.
last year in LA specifically around this topic, but and I believe they've pushed this out. So they've reached an agreement with the Actors Guild that they're not gonna basically have you show up day one, scan your face, and replicate you for infinity and beyond.
Yeah.
But anytime, and this is a broader comment, but anytime there's a union strike and they reach an agreement, it's a temporary agreement, like the UPS workers increasing their salary, whatever. It's like you're just kicking this can down the road and giving companies more incentive to AI-ify you. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a huge question too, right? Is compensating the data or the source, right? Because theoretically, but what is the fair level of compensation for these extras that come in? And I think they should be paid to have their image kind of repeated and put into different scenes, or even different movies, or different films. I think they should be compensated, but what is the correct rate for that, right? I don't know the answer to that question.
yeah, that's one Hollywood is going to have to solve.
I mean, I think those are interesting ones. I know we've talked about the background actors, the extras ones before, but I had not thought of therapists and tutors.
Yeah, by the
Yeah.
time we have kids, I would put good money behind AI therapists and AI tutors.
I remember we were chatting about you potentially homeschooling your kids. So are you just trying to offload that to an AI teacher?
Yeah,
Is what I'm
yes,
hearing.
exactly. So I can continue to be a non-AI-able person in product.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there will be definitely a lot of changes in our lifetime. I think a coworker said this to me at some point, and it's stuck with me, where, I think for one of the reasons we started this thing as well is, I think a lot of the folks that are chiming in are a bit older, and they may not have to deal with the realities of this, right? Their kids might, and sometimes their grandkids might, but they themselves are probably okay. And so, but us being in our 30s, I think this is a reality that we will have to see and deal with.
On that note, this was a great conversation. And to all our listeners, please let us know your thoughts, or if you have topics you'd like for us to address, this or anything else, feel free to submit. Our one listener.
We'll send it to Charlene, and she'll have to listen to this, and we'll have one
Yeah.
listener.